Welcome, gentle dreamer, to the realm where shadows of the past still breathe beneath the soil, where the winds whisper of forgotten temples and the rivers carry memories older than the stars we see tonight. Tonight, we drift beyond the veil of time, to the sultry lowlands of ancient Mesoamerica, to the land of mist-rooted jungles, colossal stoneheads, and forgotten gods. We seek the secrets of the Olmecs, the mother civilization of Mexico, a people who rose from the swamps and vanished into silence, leaving behind echoes carved in basalt and dreams suspended in jade. Before we embark on this journey through time's mysteries, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle like, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to continue these nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you are joining tonight's contemplation. Let the global community of history's mysteries connect across time zones as we drift together into the ancient world, one breath at a time. Now close your eyes, feel the warmth of the Mesoamerican sun long forgotten, and step softly into the forest where the Olmec priests once walked. Welcome to the cradle of Mexico's ancient soul. Let us begin. Before the first monument rose from the green heart of the jungle, before stone faces stared into the horizon with eyes that never blinked, there was only the land. The land itself, ancient and breathing, was the first storyteller. Its rivers carved the syllables of myth. Its rains whispered to the ceiba trees. Its volcanic soil held secrets from a time before memory. This was the southern Gulf Coast of what we now call Mexico. But in the time before time, it was a world unto itself. A vast lowland stretching from the glistening shores of the Gulf to the mist-draped ridges of the Tuxtla Mountains. Here, water shaped everything. Rain fell in abundance, feeding an endless lattice of rivers that glided through dense forests and wove together great wetlands. Green in the trees, green in the vines that strangled them, green in the mosses that softened the stones where no footsteps had yet passed. It was a place of stillness, yet full of murmurs. Howler monkeys screamed at dawn, birds with crimson crests sang to the rising sun, insects thrummed in the humid twilight. This land did not know cities or kings, not yet. But it was already a cradle, a womb for something waiting to awaken. Before the Olmecs, others came, people with baskets and stone tools, people who hunted the deer and fished the rivers. Their presence is barely known. Shadows beneath shadows. We call them pre-Olmec, not because they were less, but because history knows them only through what they left behind. Shards of pottery, charred seeds, a few scattered bones. They lived lightly, as if not to disturb the dreams of the forest. But they had eyes, and they saw things. They saw the rise and fall of stars. They noticed the rains came with rhythm. They saw the jaguar, that silent god of the underbrush, and wondered what it meant. They looked into the ceiba tree's roots and imagined the underworld. These people were the soil from which the Olmecs would grow. The land they inhabited was not gentle. It could flood with little warning. The mosquitoes bred in black swarms. The humidity cured everything, even thought. Yet the soil was rich. The rivers were generous. Cacao, maize, manioc, beans, the land gave, if you listened. And listen they did. In time, villages emerged. Not cities, not yet, but places where the people stayed. Near rivers like the Coatzacoalcos and the Papalopan, they began to settle. They crafted tools from obsidian brought from distant mountains. They made bowls of clay and adorned them with marks that may have meant something or everything. These marks were seeds of writing not yet born. And through it all, the jungle watched. Then came a shift. Not all at once. Slowly, over generations, the balanced people began to emerge, distinct from those who came before. They were not just gatherers, not just dwellers. They were dreamers of stone. They saw not just the jungle, but the patterns within it. They began to build. They carved symbols into jade. They chose places where the earth whispered more loudly, and they listened with devotion. We call them Olmecs, but that is not what they called themselves. Their name is lost, just like their cities, their songs, and the names of their kings. The term Olmec comes from the Aztecs, a people who came millennia later and found traces of them. Olmeca, they said, the people of the rubberland. For the Olmecs harvested rubber trees and worked them with skill. But they were more than rubber people. They were the ones who shaped the first civilization in Mesoamerica. They were the ones who saw divinity in duality, in jaguar in man, in sky and underworld, in light and the shadows it casts. But before the first colossal head was raised, before Venta or San Lorenzo or Trezapotes were carved from the earth, there was only the land, and the people who walked upon it with reverence. They were not kings, not yet, but they dreamed of something more. And the land, the ever-ancient, listen, it began with mounds. Small at first, raised platforms of earth, shaped by hands and will. Not graves, not homes, but something else. Perhaps a place to speak with the sky. The people gathered, fires were lit, offerings were made. Time began to take shape not just in seasons but in ceremony. A sacred rhythm emerged, rooted in the cycles of nature, but directed by human intent. From this, religion was born. Or perhaps it simply emerged into form. For what is religion if not the formalization of all? They watched the heavens, the morning star, the phases of the moon, the movements of the sun. They did not measure time by minutes, but by the way shadows fell on stone, by how long the rains stayed, by the call of the cicadas. Their calendar was not a grid, but a breath. Their worldview was layered. The world had three realms: the heavens above, the living earth, and the watery underworld. These realms were connected by the great ceiba tree. Its roots plunged into the underworld. Its trunk stood in the world of men. Its branches touched the realm of the divine. The tree was not just a tree. It was the world axis, the axis mundi. And so the Olmecs, these early ones, began to shape their world in that image. Mounds as sacred mountains, plazas as cosmic centers, water channels as veins of the earth. Every act of construction was a ritual. Every stone carried intent. They've worked with basalt, hard, volcanic rock. It was not easy to shape, but they did not seek ease. They sought eternity. The basalt came from the distant Sierra de los Tuxtlas, often transported over great distances by human hands and ingenuity, across the rivers, over land, through forest. Why such effort? Because the stone mattered. It was not just material. It was alive, and in shaping it, they were shaping the face of the world. One day, we do not know when, someone carved a face from that stone. Not a god, not quite human, something in between. A face so large, so deliberate, that it could not be ignored. It was the first of the colossal heads. And with that, history shifted. But before we explore the rise of these monuments, we must remain a while longer in the land before, the sacred hush before the first word. The space where myth and memory blur. For in this space, the Olmecs learned the language of the earth. They mapped the sacred. They felt the pulse of the rivers. They understood that maize was not just food, but life itself. A divine gift. They saw the jaguar not just as animal, but as symbol. A creature that walked between worlds. Strong, silent, shadow-bound. Many of their gods bore the jaguar's markings. Some wore its skin. Others were hybrids, jaguarmen. To the Olmecs, duality was not contradiction. It was truth. Male and female, light and dark, birth and death. All necessary halves of a cosmic whole. Symmetry, mirroring, balance. Even their faces, carved into stone, often show features that seem both human and something more. And in this reverence for the balance of opposites, they began to build not just structures, but civilization. In the gentle curve of a riverbank, a city began. It had no name we can recover, but one day, we would call it San Lorenzo. And in that city, something stirred. The jungle held its breath. The Olmecs were awakening. Their journey was beginning. And the land remembered. Deep within the emerald veins of the Veracruz lowlands, where the rivers speak in winding tongues, and the canopy never ceases its gentle sigh, the Olmecs began to raise their first great city. It was not a city as we would recognize it today. There were no walls of brick or towers of glass. There were no roadways humming with wheels or buildings of steel. But it was a city nonetheless. A sacred center born from intention, from vision, from the breath of the earth itself. We call it San Lorenzo. But this name is a mask, placed upon it by those who came long after. Its true name, the one whispered by wind and stone, has been lost. Yet its essence remains. San Lorenzo rose not from conquest, but from communion. It was built along the meandering Coatzaco River, a lifeblood through the heart of Olmec country. This river, like all rivers to the Olmecs, was not just a source of water. It was a sacred serpent, a pathway between worlds. Its shimmering surface reflected the heavens. Its depths held echoes of the underworld. To settle beside it was to be held in balance, in sacred harmony. The city itself did not begin as a metropolis. It grew in layers, in breaths. First came the earthen mounds, shaped by countless hands, guided by minds that had studied the stars. These mounds were not random piles of earth. They were mirrors of the cosmos. Each was placed with care, aligned with celestial events, echoing the unseen order of the universe. The Olmecs did not build to house the body. They built to awaken the spirit. The central plateau of San Lorenzo was raised above the floodplain, a man-made elevation more than 50 meters high. It was a platform upon which the heavens could meet the earth. From this height, one could see the river's glint and the endless green beyond. One could speak to the gods, or at least feel their nearness. Around this platform, structures rose, houses of clay and wood, ritual centers, sacred courtyards, drainage systems made from carved stone. So precise, so intentional. They seem modern even now. The Olmecs understood the flow of water. They channeled it not just for survival, but for symbolism. Water was life. Water was death. Water was rebirth. To control its path was to shape destiny. And then came the stone's basalt, heavy, reluctant to yield. And yet the Olmecs made it sing. From the distant volcanoes of the they brought these massive stones, some weighing over 20 tons, dragged over miles of unforgiving land. No wheels, no beasts of burden, only human will. Why such labor? Because these stones were not burdens, they were offerings. One by one, they carved faces, monumental heads, each with a flattened nose, thick lips, and helmet, each unique, each bearing the dignity of silent sentinels. They do not shout, they do not explain, but they are there, enduring. Who are these stone faces? Rulers, deities, ancestors, all three. Their eyes seem to see both the world and something beyond it. They do not merely look, they remember. To walk among these heads, there were at least 10 known from San Lorenzo, is to enter a communion with time. Their gaze lingers in the soul, and they were not alone. The Olmecs sculpted not only faces, but altars shaped like thrones. Some show figures emerging from niches, as if being born from caves or the underworld. Others depict scenes we do not yet understand. A man cradling an infant with jaguar features. A ruler seated above others, his authority unquestioned. They are not mere art. They are messages written in stone, encoded in symbol, addressed not to us, but to eternity. The heart of San Lorenzo beat with rhythm beyond words. Rituals were performed in the plazas. Priests marked time with offerings. The sun and moon were not watched, but welcomed. The jaguar god, half feline, half divine, was invoked through masks, through chants, through dreams. The Olmecs were among the first to develop a spiritual system that fused nature, humanity, into a seamless whole. For them, gods did not live far away in the sky. They walked in the jungle, they spoke through thunder. They revealed themselves in the birth of twins, in the curve of a river, in the silence of stone. San Lorenzo became not just a city, but a cosmogram, a living diagram of the Olmec worldview. The central plaza was the center of the world. The 4 cardinal directions extended outward, each connected to different realms, colors, and deities. Above all was the world tree, symbolized in their art and architecture, connecting all layers of being. And through this framework, the people lived, not as subjects of a state, but as participants in a sacred drama. Every planting of maize, every rising of the moon, every death and birth, all were part of a cosmic story. San Lorenzo was their stage, but nothing endures forever. Around 900 BC, San Lorenzo began to fade. We do not fully know why. Some say the rivers changed course. Others suspect social upheaval, or the exhaustion of resources. There is even evidence that the city was deliberately dismantled, its monuments defaced, its sacred heads buried. It is as if the Olmecs themselves closed the chapter, as if they had played their part upon that sacred stage. And now the curtain was drawn. But from the shadows of San Lorenzo, a new light began to glow elsewhere. Venta, a city even more aligned with the cosmos, a place of pyramids and plazas, altars and buried offerings. The Olmec vision was not fading, it was evolving. San Lorenzo may have been the first sacred city, but it was not the last. The Olmecs, ever dreamers of stone and sky, had more to reveal. And so the rivers carried their whispers eastward, toward a new ceremonial heart. And the jungle, ever listening, prepared once more to watch the birth of mystery. In the hush after San Lorenzo's fading breath, the Olmec vision did not fall silent. Like the tides that carried their sacred canoes along the river, it shifted, flowed, and found a new form. That form took shape upon an island of higher ground, nestled between wetlands and estuary, where the land sloped gently toward the Gulf of Mexico. There La Venta emerged, not as a replacement, but as a refinement, a revelation etched into earth and stone. To speak of La Venta is to step into geometry, into alignment, into the slow pulse of something immense and unseen. The Olmecs did not build randomly. They built with intentions so profound that each structure became an invocation, each layout a silent hymn. La Venta was not just a city, it was a map of the cosmos. From the moment you approach La Venta, a sense of order begins to whisper. The site is laid out along a north-south axis, precise, unwavering. This axis is not arbitrary. It aligns with celestial markers, with seasonal movements of sun and star. The Olmecs were watching the heavens, and they responded not with observation alone, but with imitation. As above, so below. The sky's order became the earth's form. At the center of this axis stood the Great Pyramid, the oldest known pyramid in Mesoamerica. But this pyramid is not made of stone blocks like those of later empires. It is a sculpted mound, shaped from earth and clay, over 30 meters high, rising like a sacred mountain from the wetlands. Some say it was meant to mirror the volcanoes of the Tuxtlads, those smoky giants to the west. Others believe it was the symbolic mountain at the center of the world, the cosmic hill where creation began. Whatever its meaning, it stood not as a tomb, but as a presence, a place where the divine touched the terrestrial. The pyramid was flanked by plazas, by altars, by causeways that guided the feet and the spirit. Every path was part of a ritual. Every direction held significance. La Venta was not meant to be walked thoughtlessly. It was a ceremony in space, beneath the earth, the Olmecs buried offerings, not randomly scattered but precisely arranged. Caches of jade axes, polished greenstone figurines, iron ore mirrors. These were not possessions. They were prayers, carefully placed, often beneath monuments, in patterns that remain mysterious. Some depict scenes, others form abstract geometries, as if the very ground was to become a canvas of the sacred. Among these offerings are some of the most haunting relics of the Olmec spirit. Figurines of men with slanted eyes, downturned mouths, hands placed with solemn precision. Their expressions are not of joy or fear. They are of trance, of ceremony, of something felt deeply and silently. Sometimes, dozens of these figurines were buried together in formation, facing a central figure, forming what seems to be a gathering of souls beyond time. And then, of course, the colossal heads return. At Venta, at least 4 such heads have been found. As with those at San Lorenzo, they are carved from basalt, brought from afar. Their features are unmistakable: full lips, broad noses, piercing gazes, yet each is distinct, carved with individuality. Some suggest they are portraits of rulers. Others say they represent divine ancestors. Perhaps they are both. What is clear is that they were revered, placed in sacred locations. They've watched over the city not as gods, but as memory embodied. Yet Venta holds more than monuments. It holds myths frozen in form. Consider the steely tall, flat stones engraved with images. One shows a figure emerging from a niche or cave, arms outstretched, as if being born from the underworld. Another shows a ruler holding an infant with jaguar traits. These are not mere illustrations. They are chapters of a mythology we no longer fully understand. A mythology rooted in transformation, in duality, in the journey between worlds. The jaguar remains central. At Venta, jaguar imagery intensifies. Masks, carvings, even the layout of the city seems to echo feline grace. To the Olmecs, the jaguar was not merely an animal, it was a bridge, a creature of night and shadow, of water and earth. It symbolized power that moved between realms. Some have suggested that the Olmecs practiced shamanic rituals in which they became the jaguar, not in body, but in soul. That the masks were not disguises, but revelations. Venta was also a place of sound. Though we cannot hear it now, we imagine the low beat of drums echoing through the plazas, the call of shell trumpets, the murmur of chants in a language now forgotten. Sound was part of space. Rhythm shaped the ritual. In this sacred theater, the rulers of Venta played their roles. But these were not kings as later empires would know them. They were intermediaries, embodied links between heaven and earth. Their authority came not from wealth or conquest, but from their place in the cosmic order. They wore headdresses of feathers and stone. They carried staves. They stood atop platforms during eclipses and solstices, guiding their people not just in politics, but in time itself. And Venta was not alone. It was the heart of a network. Surrounding it were smaller sites, satellite communities that mirrored its form, that participated in its rituals. Pilgrims may have come from distant lands to witness its ceremonies. Its influence reached far beyond its borders. Even in later Mesoamerican cultures, Maya Zapotec Mexica, we see echoes of Olmec forms. The axis, the mountain, the jaguar, the ball game. Seeds planted in Venta blossomed across centuries. And yet, as with San Lorenzo, Venta too would eventually fade. Around 400 BC, the city was slowly abandoned. Again, the reasons are hidden in shadow. Climate change, internal conflict, shifting trade, all have been suggested. But perhaps, as with all sacred centers, its time simply passed. The rituals no longer resonated. The axis no longer aligned. The pyramid remained. The stones slept. The jungle returned, not in anger, but in patience. And the Olmec dream moved again. From San Lorenzo to Venta, from mound to pyramid, from stone to sky. They had reshaped the world. They had aligned it with the stars. They had walked the sacred axis. And though their cities crumbled, their vision endured. In silence, in shadow, in the breath of the wind over green. To understand the Olmecs, one must step beyond the material and enter the dimension of meaning. For the Olmec world was not made of matter alone. It was composed of layers, not just physical but spiritual. Not only seen but felt. Every mound, every head, every polished stone was but the outer husk of something deeper. They lived in a cosmos, not a landscape. In a world where every direction was alive, every form a metaphor. The geometry of the Olmec sacred centers was not a convenience of city planning. It was a devotion made manifest in space. Each axis had its purpose, each direction a spirit. The north was cool, associated with death, with ancestors, with silence. The south was fertile, a direction of life and abundance. East welcomed the sun's rise. Above, west cradled its descent. A return. Above was the realm of the sky beings. Below, the watery underworld. And at the center of it all stood the axis mundi, the world tree, the Seba, the pillar around which existence revolved. This center, this axis, was not a tree alone. It was a concept, a living bridge. It appeared in their art as a cross, as a mountain, as a vertical staff, as a serpent. It was always a connector, linking the three realms of Olmec cosmology, the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Each sacred site they built, San Lorenzo, Venta, was designed to be a reflection of this cosmic map. Temples were not merely on mounds, they were mountains, portals. The plazas were not just spaces for gathering, they were the navel of the world. And beneath them, the buried offerings, the figurines, the jade, the iron mirrors. These were not hidden treasures. They were planted prayers. To walk through an Olmec site was to traverse a sacred diagram. One's path was never accidental. It traced the story of creation, of descent and ascent, of balance. Their cities were not static. They pulsed with the movement of time. Solstices, equinoxes, lunar cycles. The stones aligned not with logic, but with light. And at the center of this geometry stood the human being, not as ruler of nature, but as mediator. The Olmecs saw the self not as separate from the world, but as part of its breathing body. The priest, the ruler, the artisan, all acted in accordance with cosmic rhythm. Their task was not to impose order, but to harmonize with it. This worldview is most deeply etched in their symbols. The jaguar, always present, symbolized duality, predator and spirit, forest and dream. The baby-face figurines with slanted eyes and full cheeks may have represented supernatural births, perhaps divine children born of jaguars and humans. They were not grotesque, but transcendent living paradoxes, embodiments of union. The motif of the cave, repeated in sculptures, in altars, in stone niches, represented origin. To enter a cave was to return to the womb of the earth. It was a place of transformation. The underworld was not a hell, but a beginning. Many of their rituals involved descent into darkness, into silence, and return. Mirrors were sacred, polished iron or discs, laid flat or worn upon the chest. They reflected not the world, but its shadow. They allowed a glimpse into what lay beneath appearance. In ceremonies, they may have been used for scrying, to see beyond the visible, to peer into time's deeper currents. Even their altars, shaped like thrones, were not seats of rule alone. Many are carved with figures inside niches, as if emerging or withdrawing. They seem to say, this ruler is born from the earth, from the sacred place of ancestors, from mystery. His power is not his own, but granted, flowing from a source older than language. The Olmecs did not build for display. They built for connection, for alignment, for the honoring of unseen forces. Their mathematics, though simple in notation, held depth. They counted in base 20, like the Maya would later, fingers and toes combined. Their symbols for numbers, for time, for directions. They were not mere marks, they carried resonance. Each glyph was a breath, a sound, a rhythm. Though their writing system remains undeciphered, hints of it survive. The Cascile block, a slab of serpentine stone found near San Lorenzo, may hold their earliest script. Its glyphs, linear and enigmatic, curl like the roots of a tree seeking light. We do not know what it says, but it speaks. And in their temples, the Olmecs listened. They listened to the rain's arrival, each droplet a benediction. They listened to the winds sigh, a voice of ancestors. They listened to the silence before dawn, the breath of gods. Their rituals were slow, repetitive, deep, chants layered with movement, incense spiraling like dreams into the canopy, offerings of blood, not in violence, but in reciprocity, life given for life, breath for breath. The geometry of the sacred was not flat. It spiraled, it rose, it mirrored. The pyramid was not a tomb, but a ladder. The mound, not a pile, but a gesture. A mountain shaped by hands, earth molded into memory. And through it all, the Olmecs gazed upward, toward Venus, the morning star, toward the constellations that turned like ancient wheels. They did not merely track these stars. They welcomed them. They saw in them the movements of deities, the rhythms of fate. To be Olmec was to live inside a poem without words, carved in soil and star. To enter an Olmec site is to step into that poem still. The alignment still holds. The geometry still breathes, and though the jungle reclaims the stones, though the names have faded, the form endures. It speaks in the layout, in the echo, in the silence. For the Olmecs, the cycle was not elsewhere, it was here, in the breath, in the center, in the invisible lines between. When we speak of the Olmecs, we often think of their pyramids, their monuments, their colossal heads carved from the but beneath those vast expressions of sacred geometry lay something more intimate. The rhythm of breath, the rhythm of footsteps in damp earth, the rhythm of daily life. The Olmecs were not spirits, they were people. They slept, They loved, they feared the storm and waited patiently for rain. Their lives unfolded beneath the gaze of the same moon we see now. And though their cities sang of the stars, their days were rooted in the soil. Let us begin in a village at dawn. The sky is still violet, the jungle breathing cool mist over the rooftops. The air is thick with the scent of earth and wood smoke. A woman crouches beside a clay hearth, coaxing fire from coals saved the night before. Her hands are worn but graceful. She places maize dough on a hot comal, shaping flat cakes, perhaps early forms of tortillas. The sacred gift of maize made tangible. Its scent rises like prayer. In the Olmec world, maize was not food alone. It was life itself. It grew from the soil as the people did from the gods. It carried stories in every kernel. Myth says humanity was made from maize. And so, every meal was a remembering. Children stir from woven mats, their eyes still soft with sleep. Outside, the cries of birds call the day awake. A boy and girl run to the edge of the clearing, gathering water from a nearby stream in gourds. Their bare feet make no sound. The house is made of earth and palm, its walls woven, its roof thatched. It breathes with the seasons. It opens to the wind. Inside, pots hold beans and squash, baskets hold cacao, chili roots. Nearby, a man sharpens an obsidian blade, not for war, but for harvesting. He will move to the milpa, the field, a space cleared from the forest. There, maize grows in orderly rows, accompanied by beans twining upward and squash curling below. This triad, the three sisters, nourishes the body and the soil alike. The Olmecs practiced sustainable agriculture, knowing that the earth, like the gods, demands balance. Another man prepares to fish. He holds a net woven from fiber. His canoe waits at the river's bend, where the water thickens with life. He offers a few drops of cacao to the river before he steps in, an offering, a courtesy. Not far away, a woman prepares pigments from crushed minerals. She will paint a gourd with symbols, or dye cloth, or mark her skin in sacred ceremony. Color was more than decoration. It was presence. Red for life and death, white for spirit, black for the night's dreaming. Artisans move through the village with quiet purpose. One works jade slowly, reverently. This stone, harder than steel, must be coaxed, not forced. The artisan has no machines, only sand, water, and time. He shapes a figurine, small, solemn, with downturned lips. It is not for sale. It will be buried beneath a temple. Another carves wood into masks, human and jaguar intertwined. The masks will be worn in ceremony, but also in trance. For in the Olmec view, identity was fluid. A man might become a god. A woman might speak as the rain spirit. In a sacred moment, one's form could shift. Children play in the shade. They mimic their elders, dancing in circles, pretending to be priests or rulers. Their laughter echoes through the trees, yet even their games carry myth. They pretend to be the maize god descending to the underworld, or the jaguar stalking the stars. In the plaza, preparations begin for a ritual. Incense is lit, copal, thick and sweet, rising in spirals. A platform is swept clean. Musicians gather with flutes and drums. Their rhythms are not mere entertainment. They call the world into harmony. The priest arrives, barefoot, robed in white cotton, his eyes painted. He carries no weapon, only a mirror and a bundle of maize. He kneels before the altar and sings. The words are old, older than memory. They echo through the village like a slow tide. The ritual is not spectacle. It is the heartbeat of the people. It aligns the village with the sky. It gives shape to time. Later families gather beneath the stars. They share tamales. They drink from gourds. They tell stories, not to entertain but to remember. Grandmothers speak of the rain serpent. Fathers speak of ancestors who walked through mountains. Children listen, their eyes wide with the shimmer of myth. Sleep comes gently. The night sings with insects. The wind moves through the trees like a whisper. In their dreams, the people return to the cave. They meet the jaguar. They climb the ceiba tree. And when dawn comes again, the rhythm begins anew. There were no palaces in the early Olmec world. No vast armies. Their greatness did not rise from conquest, but from alignment. Their power came not from gold, but from harmony. Even their rulers lived within the rhythm. They were chosen not by force, but by sacred sign. Their role was not domination, but mediation, to guide ceremonies, to maintain balance. Each life was part of the pattern. Each gesture, planting, weaving, carving, cooking, was a thread in the cosmic fabric. And through this rhythm, the Olmecs endured for centuries. They lived not as masters of nature, but as its sacred children. In their breath, the jungle breathed. In their silence, the gods listened. And in their forgetting, we now remember. They stand in silence, not in rows, not in regiments, but in reverent stillness, as if waiting for a moment that has not yet come. Colossal stone faces carved from dark volcanic basalt, timeless, impassive, eternal. Their eyes do not close. Their mouths do not move, and yet they speak. They are the most iconic images of the Olmec world. Heads taller than a man, some weighing more than 20 tons, their features carved with precision, symmetry, and gravity. They wear helmets, not ornamental, but heavy with purpose. Some suggest protection for battle. Others believe they are ceremonial, symbolic of divine role or cosmic connection. But who are these stone beings? The Olmec colossal heads are not uniform. Each bears a face distinct from the others, some with wide, flat noses, others with narrower brows, some serene, others stern. They are not stylized deities. They are not mythic archetypes. They are individuals, which raises a deeper question. Who were these individuals so worthy of eternal stone? Many scholars believe the heads are portraits of rulers, not because their names are etched into them, for no names remain, but because of their scale, their craftsmanship, their placement in sacred centers like San Lorenzo and Venta. Only the most revered could merit such permanence. Their presence commands awe, not merely by size, but by intention. These heads were not made in haste. To carve one required time, strength, and vision. The basalt was sourced from the Sierra de los Tuxtlas volcanic mountains some 50 miles or more from the ceremonial centers. There were no wheeled carts, no draft animals. The stones were moved with ropes, logs, and human will. Dragged, floated, perhaps rolled. Each one a pilgrimage in stone. Why such effort? Because the stone was more than material. It was memory. To carve a face from basalt was to fix that memory beyond time, to turn the soul of a man into a monument that the gods themselves could not forget. And yet, the mystery lingers. If these are rulers, why so many, why so different? Were they placed to guard sacred plazas, to oversee rituals, to remind the people of divine ancestry? Or were they guardians of time itself, marking eras, reigns, transitions? In some heads, faint traces remain, delicate patterns carved into the helmets, perhaps glyphs, perhaps symbols of rank or lineage. But no Rosetta Stone exists for these markings. They remain closed, like a story written in a dream. One of the most enigmatic features is the emotionless calm of the faces. They do not rejoice, they do not mourn, they endure. Some have lips slightly parted. Some have eyes gazing upward. Others look inward as though witnessing something unseen. Their silence is not absent. It is presence. They have survived more than 2 millennia. Jungles grew around them. Storms lashed them. Empires rose and fell in their shadow. And still, they remain. In San Lorenzo, heads were found buried, placed beneath the earth deliberately, not toppled in violence, but laid to rest. Was it a ritual closure, a ceremonial retirement? Were they given back to the earth from which they came? In Venta, some heads were found in alignment with plazas and pyramids. They were not scattered, they were situated, as if placed to mark something, a direction, a moment, a crossing between worlds. Some suggest the heads may be part of ancestor veneration, that each one is not just a ruler, but a remembered soul, honored not in name, but in form. In many traditions, the face holds power. To see the face is to see the essence. To sculpt it is to preserve it. Perhaps these heads are vessels of spirit. In this light, they are not monuments. They are presences. And what of their gaze? They do not look at us. They look beyond us. To the jungle. To the stars. To something that once was and might be again. Standing before one, the silence becomes alive. You feel the stone's breath. You hear the echo of carving. You see the glint of sunlight on freshly polished basalt long ago. The head becomes not an object but a moment. Frozen, enduring, whispering, "We are here. We were always here. We remember." And in that moment, time dissolves. You are no longer visitor. You are witness to a memory without words, to a face without end, and the head remains still, unmoving, yet alive with mystery. In a world without written history, stone becomes the voice. And those who carved it, the artisans of the Olmec, were not merely craftsmen. They were intermediaries, shaping not just matter but meaning. Every groove they etched, every curve they smoothed, was an invocation, a prayer in form, a dialogue with the divine. The Olmecs are often called the mother civilization of Mesoamerica, and their legacy begins with the chisel. Before any empire rose, before glyphs danced across Maya codices or Aztec pyramids pierced the clouds, the Olmecs were sculpting eternity into stone. Let us imagine such a sculptor. He sits cross-legged beneath a palm shelter. The air hums with insects. A river murmurs in the distance. Before him rests a block of green jade, smooth and cold. Its color is sacred, the color of maize, of water, of fertility, of breath. He holds no steel, no mechanical tools, only stone and patience. A finer stone, perhaps obsidian or flint, to press and tap. He begins with rhythm, a slow, repetitive motion, guided by memory and vision. This will take weeks, perhaps months. It does not matter. Time bends around the sacred. The figure he sculpts may be small, only a few inches high. But within it, the universe resides, a baby face with almond eyes and a solemn mouth, lips slightly parted, limbs curled inward. Not an infant in any literal sense, but a supernatural being, a messenger between realms. These figurines are found buried in sacred places, under plazas, in caches, in clusters, facing inward, as if in council. They are not toys, they are not idols. They are moments made visible. Olmec art is enigmatic, yes, but it is never accidental. From colossal heads to delicate masks, each piece follows a language of symbols. Symmetry is revered. Forms echo the geometry of the sacred. The human merges with the animal, especially the jaguar, that liminal creature of shadow and silence. The jaguar baby, as some call it, appears often in stone, a human with feline mouth, slanted eyes, and curled limbs. What does it mean? Perhaps a myth, the union of human and jaguar, mortal and spirit, perhaps a priest in trance, caught between selves, perhaps an ancestor remembered in transformation. And yet, the Olmecs did not only carve beings, they shaped the unseen. Take the altars, often These massive, block-like sculptures were not tables or thrones alone. Many depict scenes, a figure emerging from a niche, holding a child, or grasping ropes. The niche is a cave. The cave is the womb of the earth. Emergence means birth. The child may be divine, or ancestral, or both. Some altars show bound captives, but not in pain. Their expressions are stoic, sometimes serene. Are they sacrifices, or initiates? Is this submission, or transcendence? The ambiguity is the message. To the Olmec, meaning is layered. Each form holds contradiction. A face is human and divine. A figure is ruler and child. A cave is grave and cradle. This is art is mystery, not to be solved, but entered. Their artisans were not isolated. Workshops have been found at San Lorenzo, Venta, and beyond, places where stone was shaped, jade polished, pottery fired, and yet no signatures remain. No names of artists, no schools of style. The creation was never about the creator. It was about the flow of sacred presence. Even there, ceramics bear this echo. Some vessels shaped like humans, with open mouths as if in song. Others shaped like animals. Birds, reptiles, jaguars. The line between sculpture and function was blurred. To drink from such a vessel was to commune. In Tres Zapotes, a late Olmec site, a stela was found. Stela see upon it. A date is carved, 31 BC, the earliest known long count date in Mesoamerica. The carving is rough, worn, yet clear. This was not just art, it was time made tangible. The Olmecs sculpted not only forms, but calendars. Not only faces, but fate. They left no libraries, no scrolls, but they left hands in stone, faces in clay, bodies in greenstone, and in them a voice silent still, alive. The Olmec sculptor did not carve to impress. He carved to invoke, to open the veil, to remind the world of what it forgets. That behind every shape lies spirit, behind every eye, a dream, and every curve remembers. Time for the Olmecs was not a ticking clock. It was a breath, a cycle, a song sung by stars and whispered by the earth. They did not measure days by hours, nor seasons by dates carved in stone. They felt time as a rhythm, in the migration of birds, in the swelling of rivers, in the slow turn of Venus as it blinked into the dawn. To live as an Olmec was to move within that sacred rhythm. Let us return to a dawn over La Venta. The sky blushes with violet and amber. A priest stands atop a low platform, bare feet upon cool stone, eyes lifted to the heavens. He is not observing the stars. He is listening. He knows this. Dawn marks the return of a celestial visitor. Venus, the morning star, has emerged again from the underworld of night. Its reappearance is no mere event. It is a turning point in time. It speaks not only of astronomy, but of fate. The Olmecs were among the first in the Americas to track celestial movements with precision. They marked solstices, equinoxes. They followed the lunar cycle, the solar journey, and the mysterious rhythm of Venus's appearances and disappearances. They built not just to shelter, but to align. Their ceremonial centers were laid out with intent, axes of meaning rather than convenience. Pyramids aligned with the rising sun, plazas with the zenith passage of stars. Some scholars believe specific buildings marked lunar standstills, points in the moon's long dance through the heavens. These alignments were not hidden knowledge. They were the core of Olmec existence. Time was not neutral. It carried personality. Each day had a character, a spirit, a direction. Each number held meaning. Though we do not possess a complete Olmec calendar, the shadows they cast point forward towards systems that would evolve in the hands of the Mayan Zapotecs. From these seeds, the long count was born. From their rhythms, the sacred 260-day calendar, the Tanalpahuli, came forth. It is likely that the Olmecs knew this system, or something very like it. Two interweaving wheels of time. One, a 260-day sacred cycle, combining 20 names and 30 numbers. The other, a 365-day solar cycle. Together, they formed a calendar round cycles intersecting every 52 years. Each day had a name, each name a destiny. Birthdays were more than celebrations. They were spiritual identities. To be born on 5 lizard or 9 wind was to carry that sign's burden and blessing. It was not superstition. It was communion. Even stone tells this story. Stele C of Tres Zapotes bears the earliest known long count date. It reads 7.16.6.16. A date that scholars translate to 31 BC in our calendar. It is not just a number. It is a gate in time. Who carved it and why? Perhaps to mark a ruler's reign, or a sacred event, or simply to speak the language of time. The Olmecs may not have invented the calendar systems as we know them, but they tuned their lives to time's sacred architecture. Their pyramids do not just rise, they point. Their altars do not just stand, they remember. In this worldview, time is not a line. It is a spiral, a snake eating its tail, a river returning always to its source. And we, the living, are not passengers in time. We are dancers within it. We move in rhythm. Each birth, each planting, each death, a step in the dance. To lose the rhythm is to fall into chaos. To follow it is to find harmony. And so, the Olmec priest on his dawn platform waits not for the light, but for the moment when light speaks. When the star blinks awake and the veil thins, he will mark the day, he will speak its name. And in doing so, he affirms the pattern. He becomes time's voice. Even now, when we walk through the ruins of Venta or San Lorenzo, we feel that pattern. We step into alignments we do not understand, but which pull at something deeper. The sun still rises in the east, Venus still returns, and the stones still hold their breath, waiting for us to listen, waiting for us to remember that time is not a cage, but a song, and we, each of us, are verses within it. To walk through an Olmec site is to tread lightly upon a veil, for what lies above the plazas, the mounds, the monumental heads is only half the story. The other half waits beneath the surface, hidden, deliberate, alive with meaning. The Olmecs were not only builders of earth and stone, they were gardeners of memory, planters of souls, and beneath their sacred cities, they buried the breath of their world. Let us descend. The air thickens, the light dims, the roots of ancient ceiba trees twist like veins through the soil, and beneath our feet, within the earth, the Olmecs placed offerings, not as waste, but as whispered prayers. These were not haphazard caches. They were orchestrations, carefully layered, aligned, encased, a language of placement, of silence, of return. At Venta, archaeologists uncovered one such cache, a mosaic of polished serpentine blocks, green as forest shadows, arranged in the shape of an abstract jaguar mask, perfectly symmetrical, hidden beneath a pyramid, never meant to be seen again. Why bury art where no eyes could admire it? Because it was not made for human vision. It was for the gods, or for the earth, or for something in between. To the Olmecs, the underworld was not a place of punishment. It was a source, a womb, a reservoir of spirit. To return something to the soil was to return it to origin. Many of their offerings echo this sacred reciprocity. Axes of jade, symbols of thunder and fertility, laid in parallel. Rows of figurines, small, solemn, arranged like councils, buried facing each other as if in eternal discourse. Beads, shells, mirrors, tokens of status and spirit, placed in geometric patterns, like constellations beneath the earth. Each item had breath, each placement, intention. Some of these offerings were buried beneath plazas where rituals unfolded above. Above and below, ceremony mirrored itself. As the priest chanted under stars, the stones below resonated in silence. But the most mysterious of all were the burials. The Olmecs buried their dead with care, not always in cemeteries, but often within or beneath homes and temples. The boundary between life and death was thin. Ancestors were not removed from daily life. They were folded into it. In San Lorenzo, skeletons were found beneath floors, curled in fetal position, some accompanied by offerings, beads, pots, carved figures. Sometimes, bones were painted red, the color of life, of fire, of transition. Who were these individuals? Rulers, priests, beloved elders. Their names are gone, but their presence remains. One burial unearthed near Venta contained a child, laid carefully with jade beads and a mask of greenstone. Was this a prince, a sacrifice, a spirit chosen for transformation? We do not know, but the stillness of that burial speaks. It says, this life mattered. It says, this is not the end. It says, descend not into darkness, but into beginning. The Olmecs believed in cycles. Night leads to dawn. Death leads to rebirth. Every descent is a spiral toward return. Even their altars reflect this truth. Many resemble caves, niches carved into great stones. within which figures sit or emerge. These are not merely thrones, they are gates, thresholds between worlds. In Olmec mythology, reconstructed through later Mesoamerican traditions, the cave is sacred. It is where gods are born, where ancestors dwell, where the hero twins of myth descend and rise again. To enter the underworld was not to be lost. It was to be found. Offerings were often made with materials that shimmered: jade, obsidian, iron ore, stones that catch the light and reflect it. Why? Because light, in the Olmec worldview, was not merely physical, it was spiritual, and even in the darkness beneath the earth, light was needed. Not light for eyes, but for soul. The mirror was central to this. Polished discs of hematite or magnetite, laid with the dead or buried alone. To gaze into such a mirror was to see the spirit realm, to reflect not your face, but your essence. Perhaps the mirror was a guide, showing the soul where to go. Perhaps it was a key. Even the direction of burials mattered. Bodies were laid facing east toward the dawn, or north toward the land of ancestors. Orientation was not for the sake of geometry, it was alignment with the unseen. The Olmecs knew that what is buried is not forgotten, it is transformed. The seed disappears to become the tree. The figurine vanishes to become the prayer. The body returns to the soil, not in decay, but in communion. This reverence extended even to the colossal heads. Some were buried too, intentionally laid gently into the earth as if returned to origin, not destroyed, not discarded, but folded back into the cycle. There's a rhythm here, an echo. Above ground, monuments, platforms, plazas; below ground, offerings, bones, dreams, and between them, life. To live as an Olmec was to stand on sacred ground, to walk not just upon the earth, but within its breathing. They knew what we often forget, that beneath our every step, memory waits, that the soil holds stories, that silence is not absence, but invitation. And when we listen, we hear them still. On a quiet morning where mist clings low to the jungle floor and shadows stretch beneath the palms, an echo awakens, not from speech, not from song, but from a deep, resonant thud. Rubber against stone, then silence, then another strike, a rhythm both strange and ancient. The sacred ball game of the Olmecs was not simply a sport, it was a story performed, a ceremony in motion, a dialogue between forces across the Mesoamerican world. From the time of the Olmecs to the twilight of the Aztecs, the ball game endured. Its courts lay at the heart of sacred centers, sunken alleys framed by sloped walls, oriented with cosmic precision. But it was with the Olmecs that this game may have first been born. The ball was made of rubber, a miracle of their time. The Olmecs harvested latex from rubber trees and mixed it with vine sap to make it durable and elastic. It was not a casual invention, it was alchemy, to transform tree sap into bouncing force, to turn forest breath into sacred sphere. The game's rules, in full, are lost to time, but the pieces remain. Courts carved with care, artifacts, balls, markers, figurines frozen mid-play, and the stories told through later traditions. Tales of hero twins, of death and rebirth, of cosmic balance restored. In this game, two teams opposed each other, not to conquer, but to embody the eternal dance. Light against darkness, order against chaos, night against day. Players did not use hands or feet, but hips, elbows, perhaps shoulders, to strike the heavy ball, to keep it in motion, to align with the rhythm of creation. The court itself was symbolic, a liminal space between worlds. Its long corridor was the axis mundi, the path between earth and the underworld, the ends marked by rings or markers, thresholds, symbols of completion, and every movement within was sacred. To win was not merely to triumph, it was to restore order, to reenact myth. In some versions of the game's cosmology, the players were more than athletes. They were gods in flesh, reenacting the story of the hero twins, divine siblings who descended into the underworld, played ball with the gods of death, and emerged transformed. To lose could mean death, but death was not punishment, it was offering. Some scholars argue that in the Olmec world, players, especially captains or chosen warriors, might have offered themselves in ritual sacrifice, not as victims, but as gifts, to enter the underworld through the game, to pass the ball across the veil, to become part of the cycle. And yet, we must not imagine the game only in solemn tones. It was spectacle, it was gathering. Communal, joyful, the strike of ball, the shout of the crowd, the beat of drums in rhythm with each motion. Children watched. White elders whispered stories of past matches, of gods glimpsed between plays. Priests watched closely, for the outcome was more than score. It was omen. Even the attire spoke volumes. Players wore protective gear, thick belts, padded yokes, perhaps carved helmets, not merely for safety, but for symbolism. They dressed as warriors of time. In Olmec sculpture, ball players are depicted with care, broad-shouldered, poised in motion, their garments marked with glyphs and jaguar motifs. One famous sculpture from a ritual site older than Venta includes wooden busts and rubber balls buried in sacred mud, preserved for millennia. To bury a ball was to return it to the gods. To end the game, not with applause, but with reverence. The ball game was also diplomacy. Leaders may have resolved conflicts through ritual matches, territories honored through shared play, rivalries cooled in sacred sweat. And perhaps, in the hush of evening, when the players left the court and the mist returned, the gods walked its length again, retracing each play, listening for the echo, waiting for the next game, because the game never truly ends. Its echo remains, in the stone courts now overgrown with vines, in the rubber trees whose sap still bleeds into silence, in the stars that wheel overhead, keeping score across eternity. And when we stand before one of those ancient courts, quiet beneath the moon, we may still hear the thud, the breath, the rhythm of duality, night and day, life and death, strike in silence. The Olmecs knew, as few cultures ever have, that the cosmos is not a stillness. It is a game, a movement, a song of balance, and they played it with devotion. In the jungle, nothing truly disappears. It sinks, it sleeps, it waits. Time may erode stone, but it does not erase meaning. And so, though the Olmecs vanished from their cities, their spirit moved on. For theirs was not a collapse. It was a transformation, a seeding. As the centuries passed, new peoples rose from the same sacred earth. The Maya, the Teotihuacanos, and later the Mexica, those we call the Aztecs. Each bore traces of Olmec memory. Each whispered their stories through new mouths. But the rhythm beneath was ancient. The Olmecs were not just a civilization, they were a beginning. Their cities, abandoned, did not vanish. They remained as pilgrimage sites, ritual centers reclaimed by jungle and rediscovered by dreamers. To walk into a Maya temple is to hear the echo of Olmec geometry. Pyramids still aligned with celestial events, plazas that reflect the four directions. The axis that connects above, below, and within. To open a codex of glyphs, as the Maya would do with feathered pens and painted skins, is to witness the flowering of a seed planted by Olmec minds. Though the Olmec writing system remains the very idea that symbols could hold time, fate, and divinity began with them. In the long count calendar, carved into later Maya stele with numbers stretching back before the beginning of their age, we find a memory of the Olmec gaze, a way of marking time not by reigns or conquests, but by cycles, by breath. Even in language, echoes persist. Many later Mesoamerican tongues carry remnants of Olmec structure and sound, the subtle fingerprints of an ancestral voice. In art, too, the influence blooms. The Maya carved their kings in profile, strong-jawed, wide-nosed, their brows sloped like those of the Olmec colossi. Zapotic tombs were painted with jaguar men, human-animal hybrids like those in early Olmec sculpture. Even the Mexica spoke of the Olmecs as ancestors, a people of deep power whose gods once walked the land, and the gods, they too endured. The Olmec rain god, curled in jaguar, became Chok to the Maya, and Tlaloc to the Mexica, a bringer of water, thunder, and life. The maize god, ever youthful, ever golden, remained at the heart of every Mesoamerican pantheon, for maize was still sacred, and its origins were still remembered. The ballgame lived on, evolving but unchanged in spirit. Courts were built anew across the continent. Players still struck rubber balls with hips and arms. Priests still watched from the sidelines, reading omens in the arc of each play. Even the jaguar remained, its image carved into lintels, painted onto pottery, worn on the bodies of kings, always watching, always walking between. But the Olmec inheritance was more than visual. It was a worldview, a sacred geometry of being, to live in balance, to align the city with the cosmos, to bury offerings, not in fear, but in reciprocity, to understand that time is not a line, but a circle. These ideas did not fade. They became the scaffolding of Mesoamerican civilization. Every temple built by the Maya, every feathered headdress worn by Aztec priests, every glyph drawn onto codices, or walked upon Olmec foundations. Yet, the Olmecs themselves did not write this history. Their stories are told through shards, through echoes, but the future remembered them. In the ruins of Venta and San Lorenzo, later peoples made offerings, not as archaeologists but as pilgrims. They came to honor the places where the first cities had been born. They came not to conquer the past, but to awaken it. And even in the modern world, their legacy stirs. In the villages of Veracruz and Tabasco, descendants still shape earth into form, still celebrate the rain's return, still mark the passage of Venus with quiet awe. The rhythm never truly stopped. The colossal heads, long buried, were unearthed not with fanfare, but with wonder. Farmers stumbled upon them. Children touched their lips. Historians began to piece together the forgotten story. And though many questions remain, who the Olmecs were, what they called themselves, why they vanished, the resonance is clear. They were not lost. They were passed on, through stone, through breath, through sacred rhythm. We do not need their words to hear them. We only need to listen. for their presence lingers in the roots of the Seba, in the tilt of the pyramid, in the dreams of those who walk where they once walked. The Olmecs were the beginning, and every civilization that followed was a continuation. There are places where the world feels thin, where a breath is enough to pass between realms, where silence stretches, and the veil between matter and meaning flickers like firelight on cave walls. To them, reality was layered, not fixed, not absolute, but fluid. The body was not a boundary, it was a vessel, and through it, one could shift, dissolve, become. This was the essence of their spiritual practice. Not a rigid religion, but a lived mysticism. A path walked in silence, in trance, in transformation. At its heart stood the figure of the shaman. The shaman was not merely a priest. He, or she, was a walker between worlds, a voice for the unseen, a mediator of the sacred. To become a shaman was not to be appointed. It was to be called, often through dreams, through illness, through vision, and once called, one could not remain the same. The shaman trained not in temples, but in thresholds, in caves, on mountaintops, at riverbanks where the spirits whispered. They fasted, they meditated, they ingested sacred substances, perhaps mushrooms, plants, or fermented drinks, to peel back the veil of waking thought. And in those altered states, they traveled to the underworld where the ancestors walked, to the heavens where the gods turned like constellations, to the center where the great ceiba tree bound all realms together. In Olmec art, we see these journeys carved in stone, figures mid humans growing claws, faces twisted not in agony, but in ecstasy. This was not mythology, it was experience. The jaguar was the most potent symbol of this transformation, a solitary creature of night, a silent hunter, at home in water, on land, and in trees. The shaman did not worship the jaguar, he became the jaguar. To enter the trance was to let go of human skin, to merge with spirit, to walk unseen. Jaguar masks carved of stone or wood were worn during ritual, not as disguised, but as revelation. The mask did not hide, it revealed the true face. Obsidian mirrors, polished to dark perfection, served as gateways. To gaze into one was not to see yourself, it was to step beyond yourself. The mirror reflected not the world, but the soul. Through it, the shaman might contact ancestors, might hear the voice of the rain spirit, might glimpse events yet to unfold. These were not delusions, they were visions, and the community relied upon them for planting, for healing, for naming children, for guiding rituals. The shaman was not above the people. They were within them a thread that tied the living to the eternal. When illness came, it was not just the body that suffered, it was the spirit disaligned. The shaman did not treat symptoms. They journeyed to find the root. With chants, with smoke, with herbs and touch, they pulled sickness from the unseen places. In some rituals, the shaman drew blood, from tongue, from earlobe, from skin, not as violence but as offering, life for life, a bridge of sacrifice, quiet and sacred. And always, they returned, changed, markings on their skin, tremors in their voice, but filled with messages. In the plaza, before the people, the shaman would speak, not in command but in poetry, interpreting dreams, explaining omens, guiding the next rites. Sometimes they danced, body painted, limbs loose with trance, the drumbeat carrying them deeper, not performance, possession, spirit moving through muscle. Even the construction of sacred spaces mirrored these states, labyrinthine caves, buried offerings shaped in animal forms, altars designed like open mouths, places of entry, of descent. The Olmec did not separate their buildings from their beliefs. Their plazas were places of gathering, of transformation. Their pyramids were not stairs to the gods, but resonant centers of energy. The whole city was an instrument, and the shaman, its musician. In modern terms, we struggle to grasp this. We divide science from myth, dream from waking. The Olmecs did not. They walked in many worlds, and they understood that reality is not a war, it is a membrane, thin, porous, alive, and through it, the spirit moves. To them, there was no such thing as only human. We are all part jaguar, part sky, part stone, and the shaman showed the way. With breath, with rhythm, with mirrors that held no reflection, only passage. Even now, their legacy lingers, in carved masks buried in mud, in figurines with half-human faces, in the way the jungle still feels alive at night. They remind us that we, too, are more than bodies, that beneath our skin, other selves wait, and that when we dream, we return to them. In the Olmec world, rivers were more than water. They were breath. They flowed not only through the land, but through memory. They stitched distant places together. They carried not just canoes, but ideas. The Olmecs knew this, and so they did not only build upon rivers, They became them. To understand the reach of the Olmec world, we must follow those shimmering currents. Let us begin with the Coatzacoalcos, that winding serpent of a river, whose waters twisted past San Lorenzo and whispered stories into the Gulf. This river was a lifeline. For fish, for crops, for trade, for travel. It was a sacred mirror, reflecting sky and jungle. It gave the Olmecs both sustenance and connection, but they did not stop at its banks. Archaeological finds tell of a horizon far wider than their ceremonial centers. Olmec jade has been uncovered hundreds of kilometers from its source. Obsidian, too, from distant volcanic highlands, glimmers in caches near the Gulf. Feathers, shells, pigments, all suggest a world that moved. Their centers, though seemingly enclosed in jungle, were nodes of a larger web. And at the heart of that web were the rivers, canoes carved of hollow tree trunks, glided silently across the water. Pilgrims, traders, priests, all moved in rhythm with the current. We imagine them by torchlight, paddling beneath stars, carrying jade figures wrapped in cloth, cacao in woven baskets, obsidian blades wrapped in leaves. They did not trade only goods. They carried stories, symbols, rituals, a way of seeing. When they arrived in distant villages, they shared not just what they had, but what they were. And the world listened. The Olmec sphere extended beyond their central cities. In regions like Chalcotingo in the highlands, Olmec-style carvings appear. A figure seated in a cave-mouth niche, wind swirling around him. In Tlatilco, far to the west, figurines show the same almond eyes and solemn mouths. Even in distant Chiapas in Guatemala, echoes resound, monumental architecture aligned with the same sacred geometry. This was not empire. The Olmecs did not conquer. They inspired. Through trade, yes, but also through presence, through the silent language of image and ritual. Some scholars speak of Olmecization, a process not of force, but of influence, as if their worldview was a flame carried from hearth to hearth, and those who received it reshaped it in their own tongues. The rivers were their messengers, and what they carried were seeds. Seeds that would blossom into Maya temples, Apodic tombs, and Teotihuacan pyramids. Yet the rivers were not only for trade. They were paths of pilgrimage. To journey along the water was to move through time. To approach a sacred center was not just a visit, it was a rite. La Venta, in particular, appears built for arrival. Its long, straight causeway runs north to south. A path not just of motion, but of transformation. Pilgrims may have walked it in silence, with offerings in hand, with songs in breath, with eyes downcast until they reached the pyramid, that clay mountain rising from the flatness like a dream. They may have come from days away, weeks, following river and star. The Olmec centers were thresholds, not cities for daily bustle, but spaces set apart. To enter them was to enter another rhythm, and so the rivers brought them and returned them changed. The Olmecs did not write maps, but the trails of their influence form a constellation, a network drawn in jade and obsidian, in footprints and fragments, and at every intersection even in their myths, the rivers mattered. The underworld was imagined as a watery realm, filled with caves, currents, submerged roots. To travel a river was to mirror that journey, each bend a spiral into meaning. Even today, the rivers of Veracruz and Tabasco murmur those ancient songs. They wear different names now. Their banks host new lives. But the pulse remains, and in the quiet places where the current slows and the birds call from the ceiba trees, one can still feel it. The breath of the Olmec world flowing, connecting, carrying. The Olmec world was a world of faces, not the fleeting expressions of everyday life, but eternal faces. Carved, molded, remembered, everywhere they went. The Olmecs left behind eyes that never closed, silent mouths, soft brows creased with mystery. These were not portraits of ego. There were echoes of spirit. Let us sit now, beneath the flicker of a clay lamp, in a village long forgotten. A potter crouches before her fire, shaping wet clay with careful hands. In her lap a face begins to emerge, not from memory, but from breath. It is not hers. It is not anyone's. Yet it is everyone's. The face she molds is round, the cheeks full, the eyes slanted upward, almond-shaped and timeless. The mouth, small and downturned, solemn, thoughtful, awake. This face will not speak, but it will be heard. Across the Olmec lands, thousands of figurines have been unearthed. Some as small as a finger, others large enough to cradle in 2 hands. They are made of clay, jade, serpentine, and other sacred materials. Some are full-bodied, others are only faces. All are quiet, and all are watching. We call them baby-face figurines, not because they are infants, but because of their softness, their serenity. They possess a kind of spiritual youth, as if they come from a time before time. Some hold their hands to their chests, others kneel. A few sit in a circle, posed as if caught in a ritual. Many were found buried in groups, placed beneath temples, arranged with geometric precision, as if composing a story only the gods could read. They are not toys. They are not dolls. They are presents. Perhaps they were ancestors. Perhaps spirits. Perhaps the unborn, waiting their turn. Some wear headdresses. Some wear nothing at all. A few are two-headed, gazing in opposite directions. Symbols of duality, of choice, of balance. The materials themselves carry meaning. Jade, the most prized, was the color of maize, of water, of life. To carve a face in jade was to grant it permanence, a breath that would not fade. Serpentine, darker and more mysterious, gave the figurine a shadowed soul. Clay, humble and intimate, held warmth, the warmth of touch. Masks were also made, sometimes full, sometimes half. Some were meant to be worn, others to be buried. They carried the face of the jaguar, the serpent, the godchild. To don a mask was not to hide. It was to transform, to become. In ritual, the priest or dancer might place a mask upon the face, and in doing so, step beyond self. He did not pretend. He remembered. He remembered the spirit within, the ancestor behind the name, the animal beneath the skin. For the Olmecs believed that each human carried many selves, the self of the waking world, the self of the dream, the self of the shadow, the self of the stars, and the mask was the key. It allowed the passage. It allowed the becoming. Some figurines show this transformation mid-motion. A human mouth with jaguar fangs, a human body with serpent scales. Not grotesque, but whole. This was not mythology. It was ontology, as a way of being, a way of remembering what we forget. That we are not separate. That we are of the earth and the sky, of the blood and the breath, of the seen and the unseen. Even their mortuary figurines reflect this. The dead were buried with faces, so that in the journey beyond, they would not go faceless. To die was not to end. It was to become spirit, and spirits needed faces. Sometimes, the faces were shattered deliberately, a ritual breaking, not of violence, but of release, to return the face to the earth, to dissolve the form and let the essence rise. And so these masks and figurines became more than artifacts. They became memory, not our memory. It is held in earth, whispered in clay, passed down not by word, but by presence. And when we gaze into one of those quiet faces, chipped by time, eyes closed or half open, we feel it. The reflection, the recognition. That face is not stranger. It is not ancient. It is the breath we once were, the self we left behind, and it waits, in stillness, in silence, for us to return. As the river winds slow through the coastal plain, and the mists rise softly from the marshes, we arrive at a place that bears both memory and change. A city not of beginnings, but of twilight. Not the first breath of the Olmec world, but its long and lingering exhale. Here, the past does not vanish. It transforms. The Olmec heartland, once pulsing with the sacred fire of San Lorenzo and Venta, had quieted by the 5th century BC. The colossal head still stood, silent and unblinking, but the priests had left their altars. The drumbeats of Venta no longer echoed through the night, and yet a new rhythm emerged. Trezapotz rose not as a replica, but as a continuation. Its breath carried the Olmec soul into a new form. Set among ridges and wetlands, closer to the Gulf, it became a meeting place, a threshold between old and new. Its layout was different, less strictly aligned, less centered on pyramidal symmetry, but still, at its heart, the sacred persisted. In Trezapotz, we find the last of the colossal heads, carved later, their features softer, more rounded. Some say they smile faintly, a gesture rare in earlier carvings. They bear the weight of time, but not its bitterness. They speak not with grandeur, but with memory. One such head, known as Monument A, lay half buried for centuries. When discovered, its gaze met the sky as though waking from a long dream. Another gift from Trezapotz is more subtle, but no less profound. A single carved stela C, bearing the earliest known long count date, September 3rd, 32 BC. The numbers are clear, 7.16.6.16.18. Not a mythic creation date, not a dynastic triumph, but a moment, marked, held it, whispers to us from across more than 2,000 years. The voice of a people still watching the stars. Trezapotz became a bridge between the Olmec world and what followed, between the sacred centers of the past and the new ceremonial landscapes taking shape across Mesoamerica. Its art shows both continuity and evolution. The jaguar is still there, but softened. The rulers still sit in cave-mouth altars, but their robes are different. The iconography opens, absorbing new meanings, new influences. Trezapotz did not isolate. It adapted. It welcomed pilgrims, merchants, rich. Its markets bustled with cacao, jade, obsidian feathers. Its temples echoed with old chants sung to new rhythms. In this city, the Olmec flame did not flicker out. It dimmed into coals, glowing, waiting. And those coals would be carried on by the Veracruz cultures, by the Zapotecs and Maya, each drawing from the ember. Even today, The site holds its breath. Trees lean in around the scattered mounds. Stone carvings peek from under earth and moss. The air is thick with that strange stillness that lives only in places once sacred. It is not abandonment, it is rest, a closing of one eye while the other keeps watch. For the Olmec spirit never truly ended. It transformed. It passed from pyramid to prayer, from carved jade to whispered story, from stone to seed, and it treasure-potes that passage becomes clear. Here is where the old became the future, where the face of the past turned toward what would come. The Olmec world had spoken in geometry, in silence, in the deep breath of jungle time, and now, as the stars turned overhead, its voice fell quiet, not lost, only listening, waiting for us to ask again, to touch the stone, to follow the river, to enter the mirror. And remember, in the Olmec world, the divine was not housed in temples alone. It lived in breath, in gesture, in the soft rhythm of movement, wrapped in silence. To the Olmec ceremony was not performance, it was participation, an act of realigning the world, moment by moment, with its invisible pattern. Their rituals did not shout. They flowed like rivers. They rose like smoke. They settled like mist. To begin a ceremony was to enter sacred time, not a date on a calendar, but a time without time, a moment when the layers of the world came close, when earth could hear sky, when the spirits of below whispered through stone. The preparation was as holy as the act. The site was swept, not just to clean, but to clear. Space was opened, boundaries dissolved. A priest might fast for days, not to suffer, but to empty the vessel, to make room for the breath of the divine. Incense was gathered, copal, resin of the trees, white and golden. When burned, it spoke in scent. It curled in spirals that mimicked the cosmos. The altar, sometimes a stone slab, sometimes the earth itself, was adorned with maize, flowers, feathers, and carved figures. The people would come, not as spectators, but as a living circle. Each participant a thread in the pattern, at dawn or dusk. Times of passage. The ritual began. The priest stood at the center, painted, masked, or bare, holding in one hand a mirror, in the other, perhaps, a stalk of maize. He would speak words old as rain, words not recited but remembered, each syllable a key, a turning of the world. The drum began, slow, steady, echoing the heartbeat of the earth. The flute followed, its notes curved like wind over leaves. Voices rose, not to sing, but to call the ancestors, to call the spirits, to call the order back into place. Offerings were made, not bribes, jade carved into animal form, figurines placed gently on sacred ground, baskets of cacao, maize, and chilies, feathers of birds that flew closest to the sky. Sometimes blood was offered. A priest would draw it from his tongue, his earlobe, not in pain, but in devotion, a thread connecting him to the spirits, a reminder that life and offering are not separate. There were dances, slow, deliberate, circular. Each step marked a point on the cosmic wheel. Each turn echoed the movements of sun, moon, and Venus. Children watched, eyes wide. Elders murmured names of those who came before. The ceremony did not end with a word. It faded, like smoke. The people returned to their homes, but the world had shifted. Order had been reaffirmed. The earth nourished. The sky acknowledged. The breath restored. And always, beneath it all, the rhythm remained. That rhythm was written into their architecture, into the alignment of buildings, into the direction of stairs, into the ratio of plaza to pyramid. Each structure was a ritual frozen in form. Even the burial of objects was ritual. To place a mosaic mask beneath a mound was to offer permanence to the divine. To bury figurines in a circle was to mimic the council of spirits. To align jade axes in a row beneath the ground was to plant power for future generations. Sacred time was cyclical. Festivals likely marked the solstices, the arrival of rains, the phases of the moon, each one a tuning of the cosmic strings. And in every act the principle held, to give is to live, to offer is to remember, to align is to survive. The Olmec rituals were not fossilized events. They were breaths, each one drawing the people closer to the sacred pattern they saw in stars, in seat, in silence. Even now, when we walk through their ruins, we can feel it. The hush beneath the earth, the echo in the stones, the invitation in the air. Their ceremonies are over, but the breath of the divine, that slow, sacred inhalation of being still lingers, waiting for one more step, one more offering, one more moment of remembrance. Civilizations rise with stone and song. They breathe through fire and field, river and ritual. But when they fall not with thunder. They fall with silence. The Olmecs, those dreamers of basalt and breath, did not vanish in fire or flood. There are no records of conquest. No walls charred black. No fields salted by war. Instead, their voices faded, slowly, gently, as if returning to the forest that first gave them form. By the 4th century before our common era, the great centers San Lorenzo, Venta, had dimmed, their plazas emptied, their temples ceased to breathe, their rituals went quiet. But why? What caused the breath of the Olmec world to still? We do not know for certain. We are left with shadows, possibilities. One speaks of water. The lowlands where the Olmec cities bloomed were rich but fragile, subject to floods, to the shifting of rivers. Perhaps the Coatzacoalcos changed course. Perhaps the rains faltered, and the land, once generous, grew weary. Farming declined. Harvests thinned. The people moved. Another speaks of exhaustion. The monuments, the mounds, the offerings, beneath offerings. They required generations of devotion. Perhaps the rhythm became too heavy. Perhaps the people turned to new ways. Others suggest internal change, a shift in belief, a movement of spirit. The priesthood altered. The myths reframed. New symbols rose. Old ones were buried. Still others whisper of slow migration, that the Olmecs did not vanish, but dispersed, their breath carried into new valleys, their stories absorbed by other tongues. And perhaps it is all these things. Perhaps like a fire reaching its final embers, the Olmec world simply completed itself. No tragedy, only transition. Yet the silence that followed was profound. For centuries, the colossal heads remained where they were, half buried, face down, face skyward. The jungle crept close. The plazas became fields. The temples became hills. The altars became stones. And still, the faces watched as others came, the Olmec, the Maya, the Mexica, bearing new chants, new calendars. And yet, echoes remained. When the Aztecs later spoke of the Olmecas, they told of rubber gatherers from the east, of people who knew old magic, of ancestors hidden in the green, but they could not say what became of them. Only that they had been. Modern archaeologists came with spades and notebooks, pulling stories from the soil. They named the heads, they mapped the mounds, they measured the alignments, but the silence of the Olmec remains unbroken. No codices, no texts, no carved stele spelling names and battles and kings, only stone and breath and quiet. In a world of noise, that silence is unsettling. We long for answers, for dates, for declarations. But the Olmecs offer something else. They offer mystery, a reminder that not all knowing comes in lines and letters. Some truths arrive in Muscovite altars, in jade buried so deep it forgets the sun, in a figurine's gaze that has waited 2,000 years. They remind us that a culture can vanish, and still remain in memory in architecture, in the way maize is planted, in the way myths are told. They remind us that disappearance is not erasure, that silence can be sacred, and that some songs are meant to be heard only by the earth. Today, when we stand before their monuments in Tabasco and Veracruz in museum halls, we feel that silence, not empty, but full of breath, full of waiting, for not all voices vanish. Some become the wind. It began, as so many rediscoveries do, not with a proclamation, but with a question, a whisper in the green, a shape too deliberate to be chance, a face staring up from the forest floor. The modern world did not know the Olmecs until it stumbled upon them. Even as civilizations like the Maya and Aztec claimed center stage in the histories of the Olmecs remained hidden, behind vines, beneath earth, inside silence. But the stones remembered. It was the mid-19th century when Kira shapes were first reported near the village of Trezor. Locals spoke of giant heads buried in the earth. Farmers turned their fields with blades that struck stone, and what they unearthed was a gaze that had waited over to millennia. In his Semba by Loshar Melgar, a scholar and explorer, documented what is now known as Monument A of Trezor. He called it a colossal head. He did not know its name, but he knew its gravity. The world barely noticed. Decades passed. The jungle continued to breathe, but slowly, more were found. In the 1920s, at Venta, strange mounds revealed altars and monuments buried like seeds. Archaeologists began to dig, to map, to wonder. Matthew Sterling, an American archaeologist, led expeditions in the 1930s and 1940s. His teams uncovered more colossal heads at San Lorenzo, at Venta, and with them, the bones of a forgotten civilization. These were not Maya, they were older. Their art was different. Bold, rounded, elemental. Who were these people? The word Olmec was borrowed from Aztec sources. Olmeca, the people of the rubberland. It was a name applied retroactively, a title placed upon silence. Yet it held, and slowly, the mystery unfolded. In the mid-20th century, scholars began to realize something remarkable. These sites, San Lorenzo, Venta, Trezor, predated the Maya, predated even Monte. The Olmecs were not just another regional group. They were the first, the mother civilization of Mesoamerica. The implications were profound. Suddenly, the colossal heads were not oddities. They were thresholds. Their silence was not ignorance. it was depth. The jade carvings, the buried offerings, the symmetrical plazas, all spoke of complexity, of cosmology, of time. And as excavations continued, the web of influence emerged. Olmec-style figurines found in the Valley of Mexico. Symbols echoed in Chiapas, in Oaxaca, and Guatemala. They had not been isolated. They had touched everything. But for all the discoveries, the mystery deepened. Their script still undeciphered, their language still unknown, their names still hidden. The Cascayel block, discovered in the early 2000s, may be their oldest writing. It bears symbols carved into serpentine, a possible script, a whisper of language, but the grammar remains out of reach. And so we learn not through translation, but through presence. The colossal heads now stand in museums and open-air parks. They draw tourists. They inspire books. They awaken awe. But to see them in person, to walk up to a monument that rises from the earth like a dream, is to feel something older than history. It is to remember, in Villahermosa, at Park La Venta, you can walk among the stones, past the heads, the altars, the figurines. You can listen as the breeze moves through palm. You can feel the heat of the Gulf Coast sun. And for a moment, you might hear it, the breath of the ancient world. Even in digital spaces, the Olmecs emerge, scanned, studied, reimagined. Scholars trace lineages, but always, at the edge, the mystery holds. No matter how many artifacts are catalogued, the Olmec story resists closure. It prefers the open, and perhaps that is fitting. For theirs was a civilization not of conquest, but of vision, not of empire, but of alignment. They left us no epic conquests, no long king lists, no battles carved into walls. They left us mirrors, and masks, and faces that do not forget. They left us questions, and in the asking, we find them. They are not a footnote, they are a first breath, a sacred hush at the beginning of the song, and still they echo, in the green, in the stone, in the dreaming silence between stars, beneath the monuments, beneath the masks, beneath the long-forgotten names and rituals. Their lives something even deeper. The Olmec soul, it is not bound by time. It is not chiseled in stone. It breathes, and what it whispers, again and again, is balance. To the Olmecs, the world was not a battleground between opposites. It was a weaving, where every light required its shadow, where every birth leaned gently into death, where every silence gave form to song. This duality was not contradiction. It was completion. They saw it in the jaguar, hunter and spirit, feared and revered. They saw it in water, giver of life, bringer of flood. They saw it in time, linear and circular, fleeting and eternal. In their art, this philosophy breathes. Figures wear masks, half human, half bodies twist in transformation, not from one form to another, but into both. Even their colossal heads, while stoic, seem poised between serenity and authority. They are not gods. They are not men. They are both. The world, to them, was layered, not just in three realms of sky, earth, and underworld, but in energy. There was what is seen, and what is felt, and what is remembered, and all three mattered. The shaman, in trance, did not seek to escape reality. He sought to harmonize it, to become one with its many layers. The ceiba tree, ever sacred, symbolized this perfectly. Its roots plunged into the underworld. Its trunk stood firm in our world. Its branches reached into the heavens. It was not a symbol, it was a truth. The Olmecs lived in circles. The year was not a straight march, it was a turning, marked by the journey of Venus, by the phases of maize. Planted, grown, harvested, reborn. Every ceremony echoed this turning. Every offering was part of a return. Their numbers in base 20 also followed this rhythm. Simple, elegant, cyclical. To walk through an Olmec site was to be reminded. This is not chaos. This is pattern, and we in our breath are part of it. They honored the child and the elder. They honored the jaguar and the serpent. They honored both the rain and the drought, because nothing stands alone. Even their gods, what little we know, embodied duality. There was no one god of death, no one god of life, but many intertwined. Some wore jaguar pelts. Some had the faces of infants with fangs. Some held staffs. Others cradled children. All were complex. All were reflections. Perhaps the greatest monument to their philosophy is not a pyramid or altar, but their worldview itself. A worldview that said, there is no true light without shadow. There is no birth without descent. There is no sacred without stillness. And stillness, they knew, is not emptiness. It is the pause between drum beats, the silence before the chant, the breath before speech. Even in their disappearance, this remains true. They did not collapse. They transitioned. Their silence is not void. It is space. Space for us to listen, to feel, to remember that in our lives, with all our motion, our longing, our unspoken fears, we are a dream in flesh. We are question and answer. We are memory and becoming. The Olmecs did not teach with words. They taught with presence, with stone aligned to stars, with jade buried beneath sacred ground, with faces carved to watch the future. And what they say, always, is this: the world is not something to be conquered, it is something to be understood, to be walked with, to be danced within. Not in haste, but in balance. There are places where the veil between centuries grows thin, where time no longer walks forward, but folds like mist across the jungle, where a stone face watches the dawn not for the first time, but for the thousandth, and where, even now, the Olmecs still dream. They dream not in words, but in rhythm, in the curve of the river, in the hush of the Seba's roots, in the rain that falls without request, to walk among the remnants of their world. San Lorenzo, Venta, Trezapotes, is not to enter a ruin, it is to enter a breath that continues. Though their cities have quieted, though their rituals have gone, still, something lingers. It lingers in the angle of a buried jade figurine, its eyes half closed in contemplation. It lingers in the symmetry of an ancient mosaic hidden beneath a pyramid. It lingers in the way the colossal heads face the horizon, not with pride, but with patience. They are not watching us, they are watching the return. For the Olmec spirit is circular. It waits, it listens, it turns. In our age of speed, of noise, of forgetting, the Olmecs offers something rare: stillness. A stillness not empty but full of presence. They invite us to pause, to sit at the river's edge, to place our hands upon stone, to watch the stars, not for science, but for meaning. They remind us that time is not a march, but a song, that the sacred is not elsewhere, but here, in the planting of a seed, in the reflection of a mirror, in the quiet face of a child who does not yet know the names of the gods, but feels them in the wind. The Olmecs were builders, yes, of mounds, of heads, of sacred cities, but they were also keepers of breath, of balance, of the ancient hush beneath all becoming. In them, we find the mother rhythm of Mesoamerica, the slow pulse that would echo through the Maya, the Zapotec, the Toltec, the Mexican, not as imitation, but as memory. They did not ask to be remembered. They asked to be aligned with the heavens, with the soil, with each other. And that, perhaps, is their gift, not a legacy of conquest, but of connection. Not a monument to victory, but to vision. So when you next feel the wind stir through green leaves, or see the moon rise in perfect silence, or hear a rhythm in your breath you cannot name, remember them. They are not gone. They are only dreaming, and in your stillness they stir. They rise. They breathe. And in that breath, we are remembered. Sleep now, gentle let the echoes of stone and river carry you into night. Let the stillness of forgotten altars cradle your thoughts. Let the dreaming heads of ancient kings guide you, not with power, but with presence. If this journey through shadow and memory brought you peace, leave behind a trace, a whisper, a like, and step softly into our circle of dreamers. Subscribe to this unfolding path of ancient breath, and join us again, in silence, in slowness, in the histories that wait beneath the veil. Tell us, if you wish, from where you wandered in tonight, from what distant mountain or sleeping coast, and let the world of the past wrap its arms around you. Rest, now. The Olmecs still dream, and so shall you.